great power comes responsibility. Do whatever that you want to your best ability, and there is nothing that's impossible with possibility. I am possibly the hero that nobody knew they knew him off.
Hi everybody, I'm Danny Myers-Frierson, and I'm so excited to be here to talk to one of the mayoral candidates, Mr. Nick Lebron. I want to thank Hartford Public Access Television and the Northern Agents for giving me this amazing opportunity to talk with some of the candidates. So, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So, tell me about yourself, for those that don't know you.
That don't know me. So, my name is Nick Lebron, born and raised in Hartford, born in Bellevue Square, and then lived all over the city. So, I graduated of Hartford High, and then went on to Capital Community and Trinity College, got my bachelor's and master's from Trinity College, and raised my family here, married here, found my wife in high school, and raised my children here. They went to school here, and then they went off to college and are now back here in Hartford and are leaders in their own right. So I'm Hartford born and raised.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you want to run for mayor?
Well, I think it's the opportunity and the ability to do more with more. I'm a Hartford success story, and I have a plan for Hartford success. I've been giving back to my community for over 30 years in various capacities. I first started out as a Cub Scout troop leader in Westbrook Village. I partnered with Elizabeth Horton. She was a councilwoman at the time, and she got me a space in Westbrook Village, and I had 10 Cub Scout troop campers, I think they're called. And so I did that, but since that time I've been dedicated in various capacities, and have been a community organizer, been an advocate, a lobbyist, and more recently a director for community schools. And so all of those opportunities, I believe, have really positioned me and provided me with a unique lens to be able to do more with more, as I said previously. The past 4 years have been very interesting for me. I'm on council now, I'm a councilman now. And during that time, we had COVID, the worst pandemic that the world has seen, and Hartford in particular. And so during that time, I was the chair of Health and Human Services. Really learned a lot about the nuances of city government, and more importantly, affecting services to save lives. And I'm very proud of that work. And so I think all of those things provided me with the professional experience. But I think also what's important is that I have the personal experience and the lived experience. I was a teenage father and had 3 children by the age of 19. And so what those experiences provided me is the understanding and the challenges that a lot of what our families go through in the city of Hartford, you know, struggling with poverty, housing issues, substandard housing, you know, what it's like not having enough money, or the lights being cut off, or having to sleep on the floor. And so I've went through all of those things, and so my success hasn't been linear. It's been one that's been up and down. But Bob Marley has a saying that he who feels it knows it. And so I think that that provides me with the unique opportunity we have now.
Okay. So Hartford born and bred. Your family's currently here.
Yes.
And I want to know, you said you are a Hartford success story.
Sure.
So talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I think oftentimes there's a lot of risk factors associated with poverty, right? And so I was born to 2 teenage parents in Bellevue Square who didn't have jobs at the time. And I think, you know, when you think about that and you compile the data on a citywide basis, you know, that's a significant risk factor. And so throughout my lifetime, I've been able to overcome a lot of risk factors through hard work and effort and love for my family and my children, but also the love that Hartford provided me. There were key people throughout my life that catapulted me and provided me opportunities. I got a scholarship to Trinity College because someone saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And so those are the opportunities that I was blessed to be given. And I think that those are the opportunities that we need to share more of in the city of Hartford, and for people to have more access to those opportunities. It shouldn't just be the chosen few. Everyone should have equal access to every opportunity that we have in the city of Hartford.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
How will you as mayor,
Mm-hmm.
if you're given the opportunity,
Yeah.
ensure that the people that are not just in the talented 10th or the success stories, the ones that are really in the underbelly?
Yeah, so I'm no different. I was in the underbelly. I have family in the underbelly now. I stay closely connected through my work, my day job. I'm a director of community schools, but I'm a social worker by trade. And so I've worked in Hartford's hardest neighborhoods and also all over the state. And so what I think is we have to really focus on the neighborhoods and the opportunities and provide them with real opportunities. The best example is a story that I like to share. It's a story about Michael, who lived on Magnolia Street. He was a single dad trying his best with 3 kids, 2 in high school at the time and 1 in middle school. And I remember talking to Michael. I had just started out in social work, and I was talking to Michael in his kitchen. And, Mike, I was telling him about this job training programs, and Michael turned to me and he smiled. And he said, "Nick, come with me for a second." And we went to his living room, and in his living room on the wall, he had a whole bunch of degrees, and not degrees, but certificates in job training programs. He's like, "These job training programs don't do anything. They're just papers on the wall." And so, we have to do more than just provide things. We have to do follow-up and get people like Mike through the programs, because if you do a job training, it doesn't mean anything if you don't have a job at the end of the pipeline. And so I think about that story and as a microcosm for all the services that we should be able to provide, whether it's access to housing, which provides the #1 source of generational wealth opportunities for people of color in the city of Hartford, job opportunities, home ownership opportunities, poverty opportunities, as well as folks that are on the cusp. I think oftentimes we talk about families that are below the federal poverty limit, or as we understand poverty. But I think about folks that are just above poverty, right? The ALICE population, that as they're called nationally. I forget what ALICE means, but it's folks that are 1 paycheck away from being in dire circumstances. And I think that being able to understand systems and my social work background and and the successes and the opportunities that I've been able to encounter and also share and help support thousands of people in the city of Hartford would give me a unique opportunity, a unique vision to help everyone all over the city, not just in certain pockets.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a North End girl.
Oh, right.
So I'm always gonna have
Sure.
to ride for the North End.
Okay.
So we know about the flooding and things that have
Absolutely.
occurred in the North End.
Mm-hmm.
What are your plans on working with MDC to possibly reroute some of the funds and applications?
So let me say very clearly that I was the first one, the mayoral candidate back in February to speak out about the MDC. I in fact resigned from the MDC, and I challenged all of my counterparts that if they received any money from MDC lobbyists or anybody affiliated with MDC, that they should give the money back. Because how can we as a community trust that someone is going to go face to face with MDC when they have their hands in their mayoral campaign pockets? So I still push that today, and I want to stand firm on that, because the MDC is influencing this very mayoral election. I am very proud of the fact that I don't have any campaign donations from anyone affiliated with the MDC, any lobbyists, any admin, no employee whatsoever. And I think that that's important, because we're going to have to face this head on, and we're going to have to face it with a reality that at its fundamental core, the design of the MDC and the design of the plumbing is due to structural racism, right? It's fundamentally, it was built underneath our city, and these pipes and everything was built particularly in the North End, because at the time when they were developing these pipes, or whatever language you want to use for the sewer system, it's documented at the state legislature that Black Americans or African Americans, but they, were unable to advocate for themselves. This is what is said, and it's in notes. They also did it in pockets of Spanish communities because they felt that Spanish people didn't know how to speak English. So these are structural issues that you have to talk about. And so in order to undo this injustice, you have to face it head on. And that's already the extreme of potential lawsuits. So I think that's number one, overall the framework. But that's not gonna do anything for somebody tomorrow, right? So I think the second thing is the continued stream of dollars to help people fix these legitimate issues. The other third thing that no one seems to want to talk about is the neglect that the city of Hartford has done with our sewer system and our storm grates, as well as the Park River. The Park River continues to flood because it needs to be dredged. It has been ignored for a very long time. The reason I know this, because in Westbrook Village, we would walk down to the river, and when you hang out where your parents tell you you're not supposed to go, that's where you go. And so you see it's backed up. And, the same trees that fell down 20 years ago are still in the water now. And so, all of those things are contributing factors. But the main thing is having a mayor that has the courage to speak for the people in our community and speak to the things that are right in front of our face and tell the truths. And I'm a truth teller.
I like it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the taglines for your campaign is Hartford is not for sale?
Yes.
No longer for sale?
Yes.
Very catchy.
Yes.
Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, it's interesting how I arrived at that. That wasn't, it wasn't planned out. It happened during a meeting, and it started with me saying the for sale sign is coming down. And so we have a great team that's led by my campaign manager, Candace Dorman, and she's very particular about things and prepping me. So it came spontaneously during one of my early debates, early forums. I think it was the NAACP, and it just struck me because we continually talk about the dollars, and we particularly talk about money in downtown and money in investment and money, but really what we need to look at is money invested in the mayoral campaigns. We need to ask ourselves, why does folks in California to the tune of $50,000 to $100,000 investing in a small city like Hartford? We should ask those questions. Why is it that some of the candidates have over 50% of their donations in $1,000 increments from Texas? Like, these are the type of things that we don't necessarily have to proclaim anything nefarious, but we should ask ourselves why. The other thing is to really look at the campaign finance and see the amount of slumlords who are continuing to donate in the campaign, but yet you see the candidates, again, going in front of people saying how they'll tackle on slumlords. How are we supposed to trust that if we have slumlords investing primarily in people's campaign, if they have their hands in the pocket? Again, on a political scope, there doesn't seem, Hartford, I believe, has 2,000 or 3,000 Republican voters, but you have close to $250,000 invested from significant Republicans and prominent Republicans and Trump Republicans in this mayoral campaign. So they may not be here, right, as voters, but they're here investing anyway. And we have to ask ourselves why. And so the question that I become and I put on to everyone else and I tell the community is Hartford for sale? Because with the Lebron administration, it is not.
How will you not be bought?
I think that the main issue is starting from day one. And you have to have integrity from day one. Again, I could have reached out to the same lobbyists with MDC. I could reach out to the slumlords. I can reach out to those typical campaign folks. But I choose not to. I choose to get my donations and the people to support me through community organizing. I was a community organizer for many years and an advocate for people in the community and listening to their voice. And listen, from Hartford, in terms of wealth and opportunity, yeah, we're not the wealthiest city, but we have solutions here in the city. And we have people who have great ideas. And we have people who can afford $10, $50. And what's wrong with that? I ask that. I have over 1,000 people who have donated. Yes, it's easier to get one person to donate 1,000, but I'm very proud of getting 200 people to donate $5, because at the end of the day, it's how many people go to the booth and pull that lever for Lebron.
Nice. So you kind of talked about
Mhm.
COVID a little bit.
Sure.
So as we are coming back to life, right?
Mhm.
How committed are you in the training of culturally competent counselors and mental health workers?
I think that it's integral. I believe that we should have no wrong door and access to all opportunities. And so, culturally competent community health workers are so vital. So one of the things in COVID, I get excited because this was something that was very near and dear to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
When COVID first came out and the monies and grants started coming out, it was so important for me to make sure that the monies went to culturally competent nonprofit organizations within the city of Hartford who can do the work and has the best ties to the community.
Mm-hmm.
We have to do it that way. What we saw at the beginning when the money was coming out, and what is a reflection of not being culturally competent, is we saw vaccine sites that were run by people who were in military garb, right? That, I remember getting phone calls from the folks on Barber Street, Unity Plaza. We're in the middle of COVID, and we're in the middle of this pandemic, and we have people in army fatigues in the middle of Unity Plaza just showing up, right? The scare that folks had, this one person who lived in Chappelle, I don't want to say, her name. I remember the fear in her voice, like, what is going on? We have this pandemic, we can't go anywhere, but I see the army at the Unity Plaza, and that is not culturally competent. And what they were talking about was, oh, we spoke to the community members. You didn't speak to the community members, you spoke to two people, that is not necessarily a reflection of the community. So we have to be intentional about the work. We can't just paint with a broad brush and speak to the handful of people who say they represent the community, and they do at their heart, but they don't represent everyone. And so we have to be intentional about going out there, speaking to people, listening to what they're doing, and then responding in a culturally competent way. Because if we don't, we can never approach the work with an equity lens. It would always be with an equality lens, and when you approach things with an equality lens, you make mistakes like that.
Why should the people trust you?
Well, born and raised here, I had the opportunity to leave on multiple occasions, but I chose to stay here, as a professional. A lot of cities, not just Hartford, suffer for something called brain drain. People go in, they get the education, they get the degrees, and then they leave. I chose to stay. I trusted the school systems to educate my children. They went on to college and came back. They chose to stay. My family's here. I go grocery shopping. I was just at Bravo's this morning. I got my pharmacy is in Hartford. So I think the importance around trust is having a mayor that is tangible, someone who's going to make a decision, but that you're going to see him in the community, who's going to reap the repercussions of his very own decisions. And so I think that that's important. When you have people who are in leadership who don't run in the same circles, it's very easy to make decisions because you don't have to follow up and see the people in the line at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. And so I pride myself on that. And let me just say this, there are often times, not often, but there are times where folks disagree with me, and that's okay. To have a city of 125,000 people and to think that we're going to all agree with each other is naive. And so I think that that's important, to have the ability to make those courageous conversations over critical decisions.
Absolutely. When you, going back, you talked about the systematic racism within the North End and some pockets within the South End. When you talk about rolling out your plan on redistribution of wealth and things of that nature, how will you involve the community and hear their voices?
Well, I think we have to want to, right? You have to want to do it. I think the NRZ plays a purpose. I don't think that it is utilized enough, but I think we have to think beyond the NRZ. There are groups, there are faith-based organizations who are making changes in people's lives every day. Right? We talk about the amount of churches that exist in our community, but the church was the first forefront of social work, long before the word social work or the social work industrial complex existed. So, we have to hold everyone relevant and really listen. The other thing that I think we have to do, and what's right in front of us, is doubling down on the commissions. So an example of this is last year I was able to change the charter that allows folks who attend commissions to be fully vested. Oftentimes what you see in those commissions, they're given at a certain hour, which are not conducive to people's work schedule. They generally don't have children allowed to attend, and they're generally done during times where folks are having dinner. What I propose and what I will be doing is on the commission is having childcare, transportation, and breaking bread. There's nothing like breaking bread with folks and eating and coming together. And so that way we can have a different archetype of person and a more diverse type of person at these commissions, right? We can't continue to have the same type of people at these commissions and at these advisory committees who don't have the diversity and the wealth of the background of the entire community. And the way to do that is to address those challenges to get the people there. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to change the legislation last year with the charter. I was unsuccessful to find the monies this year. The council and I, that we had different priorities, and so I got outvoted. But that will definitely be on day one. And we need to fill these meetings. You know, on a local level, we have so many boards and commissions that govern our daily lives. Mm-hmm. And we need to be represented there. Those are the opportunities. And they need to have teeth. They don't need to just be meeting together just to have pizza. They have a responsibility to help guide and shape policies that help the betterment of the entire community in all of Hartford.
Absolutely. How will you work across the lines with your constituent?
Well, which lines? Because there's a bunch of them. They're all man-made, by the way.
Absolutely. So how will you?
Well, navigate? I think one of the things, right? Being a North End Puerto Rican, I've been able to cross all sectors, right? We exist. We out here. Right? And so I think that's important to understand. Mm-hmm. And so I'm able to walk in a room in the South End and speak Spanish, and I'm able to walk in the North End and walk on Main Street or, Chappelle. I lived in Chappelle for 7 years. And so I'll share a story with you, and I think it's important to understand the problem of being divided in order to come up with a solution. So when I was a lobbyist, I was speaking to a representative, I believe she was in Brantford. And at the time, I was lobbying for education in Hartford. And as I was speaking to this lobbyist, and the reason why, because at the state level for funding, you gotta have everybody kind of vote, not just your local Hartford delegation. And as I was talking to, she was a white woman, and as I was talking to her about the proposed policy changes that I would have liked to see in the upcoming budget for the state for educational purposes, she looked at me and saw that I was a Puerto Rican man, and she looked at me and she said, "Nick, isn't that a North End issue?" So I thought it was very intriguing because you had somebody from the shore who understood the division so concretely that she couldn't understand how a Puerto Rican man was advocating for education in the North End of Hartford. It just couldn't. So those divisions, what it allows us to do, those divisions perpetuate outside of Hartford. Mm-hmm. And so what it allows us to do to be weakened. And so as divided as a city as we become, the more easily the opportunities are for people to misplace our agenda or move in different directions that really don't serve the entire city. So by coming together and having and uniting around the common issues, we'll be stronger together.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to share with me?
I'd like to share, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for HPA-TV and for the opportunity to share my belief. I just want to tell folks that, not only do I have the professional and the lived experience, but I have a Hartford success plan. You can find it on LebronForHartford.com. You can find it on social media. I have Twitter. I do have Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I don't have TikTok. I'm looking for young interns to help me run my TikTok page, if that's all viable anymore. It changes so often. But I want folks to not only understand me and understand my story, but understand that I have the professional and I have the vision for the future that I think could take Hartford and all of Hartford to the next level.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andriana Milner, or Dree for short, and I'm here representing the Connecticut Black and Brown Student Union, or CTBBSU. Today, I'll be here to ask the mayoral candidates some questions presented to me by some of our youth in our program. What services are you planning to implement to help combat the mental health crisis currently impacting both youth and adults alike?
Well, I think the first thing is getting federal funding and applying for federal funding with our grants department on twofold. Number one is to assist our Hartford Public Schools and bring more mental health services and clinical services inside the school. But I think we have an opportunity in terms of human services and health and human services is really having a department within there that focus on the mental health and access to mental health. I think what happens with mental health is that it's fragmented and the system is so it's a web, if you will. And so we have to help families and help people get access to services in a coordinated way. So if you look at the Lebron for Hartford website, we have something called the Bridge Center. And what the goal of the Bridge Center is, anybody who walks in, there's no wrong door. And so we will give them access to whatever services that they so rightly deserve.
What are your top 3 issues impacting the residents within your community? And what is your plan to resolve them?
Well, the number one issue that is happening in our community that is impacting the residents is the violence. The violence is a tragedy and continues to cause endless trauma, in our communities. And regardless of the neighborhood, it's all the same. People don't want to live in fear. They want to go to work and they want to come home. They want to go to school without that fear. And the way that I would tackle that problem is understanding the root of it, and in particular the gun violence and guns. These guns aren't getting here legally, they're getting here illegally. And there are means and ways to try to combat that. I think partnering on the federal level with my friend Senator Chris Murphy, but also doing interstate compacts on a state level and really holding the people who so-called lose their guns and they get a slap on the wrist for losing their guns while we get a hole in our chest and die. And so that is a problem. And so that's number one on the agenda and on everyone's mind in the community. The other 2 things are access to opportunities and access to wealth and having a city that is economically thriving. Right now, we're we have the largest financial wealth gap in the state. And that has been going on for a long period of time. And the reason why you have that is that you still got the same political people in power perpetuating poverty and capitalizing off of our poverty. So with the LeBron administration, we would tackle that head on and provide access to opportunity for all the people, not just the people that are politically connected. The last thing is to unify our city, because if we come together and form a unified front collectively, we would have the power to move mountains at the state level.
Can you commit to working with your community and actively listening to the various leaders within them when they come to you with the intention of working to help in the resolution of the issues they are facing?
Yes, I've been doing it. I pride myself on doing that for my career. In my career, I started off as a community organizer, and the integral part of any community organizing effort is listening to community voice. And so what I've been able to do over a period of time, particularly when I was organizing in the community, is we were able to change policies with bureaucratic levels by having the community voice come in the room. And let me tell you something. When the community, when we make our presence felt, it makes a difference. Because when we're in the room, it's harder for them to talk about us than when we're out of the room. And so we have to continue to make our presence felt at every meeting, and even in those backdoor meetings that they don't want us in.
Why do you believe the city should trust you to know and to do what's best for them?
Well, I think I'm a product of the city. I'm a Hartford success story. I was born and raised here in the city of Hartford, born in Bellevue Square to 2 teenage parents who were in love at the time. And so since that time, I've chosen to live here in our communities and lived in various areas in our community. But I think one of the most important things is that I chose to raise my children here. and they went to public school here. And I trusted our community and I trusted our school system enough to understand that they can also be successful. And I'm very proud about that because they've gone on to college and they've come back and they're leaders in their own right. And all that was based upon trust and love. So you can trust that Nick Lebron, if I make a policy, you're going to see me in the grocery store. You're going to see me in your local community event. You're going to see me reap the repercussions of the actions that I choose to make. I don't believe Hartford should be a stepping stone city. I believe we need a mayor that can see initiatives through and make sure that they stay to have the repercussions and feel the repercussions as well. When you have a stepping stone mentality, you're only in it for the now. A mayor needs to be in it not only for the now, but for the future generations. There's a proverb that is said, a person who, and I'm totally messing up this proverb, I just want to say that, but a person who plants a tree doesn't plant a tree for themselves because that shade will never provide shade for them. They plant it for future generations, and I absolutely believe that's what a mayor should do.
Are you planning to largely increase the funding/budget and services for our school and education systems?
Well, I think so, yes. So I think, I get excited about this. Let me just say this because funding is so handcuffed right now. At the state level, we have something called an ECF formula or an educational cost sharing formula. What we have to do is break up the way that we're currently funding our schools. Right now, there's 13 different funding streams on how we fund our schools. I know it becomes a little bit complicated and obtuse, but that's what we pay lobbyists for. So I would hold my lobbyists accountable to make sure that they're fighting at the state level to get the funding that we deserve and our students deserve. That's number one. Number two, the second piece is providing the supports in the school. Look, we have to understand that our young people are going to school with a lot of challenges. I think it's easy to say that we want them to show grit in the classroom, but sometimes it takes just grit getting to school and walking through certain communities. And so we have to address the well-roundedness of each and every scholar. Teachers didn't go to school to be social workers or therapists or, basketball coaches, right? They went there to teach trigonometry. So what we have to do as a community and as a city is provide the wraparound supports so that way they can excel in school. It's hard to learn when you're hungry. And it's hard to learn when you just saw something the night before that is causing trauma. And so we need to address those issues. And listen, they're at the school the most. They're there 40 hours a week. So why not give the youth the services that they deserve?
What do you plan to achieve and complete by the end of your 4-year term?
So the end of a 4-year term, what I plan to complete is having that's a great question, by the way. I think that's a wonderful question. So hopefully you could chop this up and make it sound better. Because I think it's an important one. I think oftentimes mayors talk about the future, but they don't talk about what happens and what they complete. I think at the end of 4 years, I want my community to hold me accountable. My tagline is people, purpose, progress. And so we have to create tracking mechanisms to really see, has progress been made? We could implement policies, we could talk how many people went to a meeting or said this, but we have to look at each other and say, is anyone better off? So what will happen at the entire city level is we would have mechanisms to understand, are we better off because of policies? I think that is the number one thing. The second thing is the deliverables and the people that are serving folks in the community. We have to fully staff our city services. Right now, we have 20% vacancies, or I think it might be even more. And it doesn't make sense for us as a city to have all of these vacancies on one end, but have all these unemployment rates in the city of Hartford at another end. There seems to be a disconnect there. So we need to tackle that. And then lastly, everyone should have access, and we should be serving everyone with all their needs. And that's exactly what I want to do with the Bridge Center. So that's people, that's purpose, and that's progress.
What is your vision for the city, and how do you plan to transform it?
Well, my vision for the city is to understand that everyone should have access to opportunities. We should live in a city where folks feel safe going home, safe going to work, safe walking to school. And how we would actualize it is by putting in place mechanisms to track, are we doing a better job? This will be a results-based accountability city. We have to track our progress. We also have to fulfill our empty jobs and unemployment. And lastly is listen to the people in our community. And so that's the way that I would envision it, by focusing on people, on purpose, and progress.
I've been to a few mayoral candidates kind of press conferences, interviews. They all say that each town, each city has vacancies, right? But with the vacancies, there are these requirements that you have to fulfill in order to apply. How can you fill that gap?
So the requirements are self-imposed, so you could tackle them right away. You change the charter and the rules that create the bureaucratic red tape. I think it's that simple. Right now, we get in our own way in terms of hiring. What happened with these bureaucracies and why they currently exist? Because there was a time where people had jobs and were given jobs because of nepotism and who they knew. So that we created policies, and Hartford's no different, that stopped the politicization of getting employment. But right now, that pendulum has swung too far, and we need to bring that pendulum back. And we need to cut the bureaucratic red tape that allows folks to have opportunities to jobs. The other thing that I would create is and this is on the Lebron for Hartford, you'll see with our human capital plan, is that creating a workforce development program, right, that is sponsored by our major, our top 10, if you will, taxpayers in the city of Hartford, to create a workforce base. Sometimes there are just soft skills that you know folks need to learn, and sometimes computer programming and those type of things. And so we need to collectively build up our base of employable young people or anybody alike. And so that by building that base, we'll be able to tap in. And then that way people can find careers that they can take care of their families and take care of their loved ones within the city of Hartford. We got great people that are working at the city of Hartford, but they're stretched thin because of these empty spaces. So we have to be innovative. We cannot continue to look at a problem and try to solve it with old ways. We need new ways. We need fresh, new, innovative ways to attack new problems, especially post-COVID.
How do you plan to manage the new COVID variant if an outbreak were to happen within the city?
So how I would manage another COVID variant breakout is something that I'm uniquely qualified for. I was the chair of Health and Human Services during the COVID-19. So I think the first thing is getting everybody in the room together that are on the front lines. You're talking about the school systems, all the services, the ambulances, the hospitals, the police, you know, anyone who's going to be on that frontline worker that has direct involvement with the city. So we would have to do that. We'll have to implement a plan and then make sure that we're following through on that plan. But also understand that we have to be flexible. Plans are all good until something happens and then you have to adjust. And as we go along, we have to use data as a tracking mechanism to understand how successful that we're being at this plan. And education is always vital, and education would be key. One of the things I'm very proud of under my leadership as the chair of Health and Human Services, the city of Hartford was first to put out testing, the first to provide vaccine, the first to do at-home tests to provide those. And lastly, a resolution that I wrote was the attestation, which meant that if you took a test at home, you could provide that to your employer, so that way there were no consequences and you didn't have to lose your job. That was something that I was able to provide ahead of time and ahead of the curve. And I think just focusing on innovation and listening to the community as a way to respond would be how, God forbid it would happen in the future.
As a representative from the Connecticut Black and Brown Student Union, we do believe that police have to be accountable, right? We do believe that our students are being overly policed in their schools, not only in their schools, but in their city. How can you kind of come at that issue?
Well, I think a couple things. So, folks talk about community policing, but they talk about it in a way that doesn't really have any solutions. See, the way I look at community policing and the way that I look at avoiding over policing is that the police are an active member of the community. People know their names, people know who they are. So then you ask, well, how can we do that? Well, what we found is, and what research show, is that over 85% of policing, or close to 90%, depending on the area, happens in their vehicle. So what does that mean? Let's think about what that means. That means that police are driving around looking for opportunities to police, right? And so what that creates is a predator kind of prey mentality, right? Where they're driving around and folks react to see the police. You have code languages in the street where they say popo, 5-0. In Puerto Rico, they say agua. I think the young people call it 12. And so what that means is to avoid those opportunities. If we are able to measure how many times police get out of their car for non-policing issues, then we can understand that they're actively, being in the community, getting a acapugia on Park Street, or getting a beef patty. I like Cocoa Bites, but a Cocoa Bite at Scott's, getting out of the car, going to the library, visiting businesses. Like, those are the opportunity. They shouldn't just come to the city to police. They should come to the city to be part of the moral fabric and the community fabric. And so we can measure that, and we can show their statistical analysis. One of the things that I was able to do while I was on council, I created something called the HEART Team. And what the HEART Team does is a revolutionary way to respond to 911. And so what we do is, what we found is, in the research, is 65% of 911 calls don't need police response. But when you have a police officer going to respond, it's going to inevitably end up with disproportionate minority contact with the police. And so by utilizing the HEART Team and understanding that at the root of the call, the 911 call, where it all starts, if we're able to respond appropriately with the appropriate response, that'll be the number one way that I would do in doubling down on the HEART Team and HEART services to stop this over-policing and this over-policing concept that we continue to see perpetuate and plague our communities, and over-policing and over-incarceration, and continuing to fill that prison, that school-to-prison pipeline, and wealthy people and other communities benefiting from the prison industrial complex.
Thank you.
I want to thank you, the North End Agent, and Hartford Public Access TV for allowing me to come here and share my story.
With great power comes responsibility. Do whatever that you want to your best ability, and there is nothing that's impossible with possibility. I am possibly the hero that nobody knew they number one.